The sky was burning. T stood on the observation deck of the command center and watched the flames spread across the horizon. They were not natural flames. They came from above, from the warships that filled the darkness of space like a swarm of hungry insects. Each flash of light in the sky meant another defense platform had died. Each rumble beneath his feet meant another part of his world was gone. He was young for a commander, only 32 cycles old. His pale blue skin still carried the smoothness of youth, and his large silver eyes had not yet learned to hide fear. But he was all they had left. The senior officers were dead. The generals had fallen with the orbital stations. Now the fate of 3 million Velen civilians rested on his narrow shoulders. "Commander," a voice called from behind him. T turned to see Yi, his communications officer, standing in the doorway. Yi was even younger than him, barely past her coming-of-age ceremony. Her hands were shaking as she held a tablet. "What is it?" T asked. "Governor Yuna wants to speak with you. She is in the central chamber." T nodded and followed Yi through the winding corridors of the command center. The walls were old stone, carved by their ancestors 1,000 years ago. The Velen were a peaceful species. They had built their civilization on art, philosophy, and the quiet contemplation of the stars. They had never expected the stars to send monsters. The central chamber was filled with worried faces. Advisors, scientists, and minor officials all stood in small groups, whispering to each other. Their voices fell silent when T entered. He felt their eyes on him, looking for hope. He had none to give. Governor Yuna stood at the center of the room. She was old, her blue skin faded to a soft gray, her movements slow and careful. But her eyes were still sharp. She had led the Velen colony of Orithroman IV for 40 years. She had seen droughts, plagues, and political crises, but she had never seen anything like this. "Commander T," she said, "thank you for coming." "Governor," T replied with a small bow, "what are your orders?" Yuna was quiet for a long moment. She looked around the room at the faces of her people, then back at T. When she spoke, her voice was calm but heavy with sadness. "I have sent distress signals to every allied system within range. The nearest fleet that can help us is 40 standard cycles away. The Keth will reach the surface in less than 6 hours." T felt his stomach drop. 40 cycles. That was almost 2 months by human measurement. They would all be dead long before help arrived. "What about the coalition?" someone asked from the crowd. "Surely they will send ships." Yuna shook her head slowly. "The coalition has acknowledged our message. They have expressed their sympathies, but they will not risk war with the Keth Dominion for a small colony world." A murmur of despair spread through the chamber. T understood their fear. The Keth were the most feared empire in the known galaxy. They did not conquer worlds for land or resources. They conquered them for flesh. The Keth harvested other species, using their bodies for biological experiments and genetic modifications. No world they had attacked had ever survived. No prisoner they had taken had ever been seen again. "Then we fight," T said. His voice was louder than he intended, and the room fell silent again. "We cannot win against their fleet, but we can make them pay for every step they take on our soil. We can protect the civilians in the underground shelters. We can buy time." Yuna looked at him with something that might have been pride or might have been pity. "Buy time for what, Commander? No help is coming." T did not have an answer. He wanted to believe that something would change, that some miracle would appear from the darkness. But he was a soldier, not a dreamer. He knew the truth. They were going to die. He spent the next 2 hours organizing the remaining ground forces. There were only 800 soldiers left, most of them wounded or exhausted from the earlier fighting. They had light weapons and a few defensive barriers. Against the Keth war machines, they would last perhaps a day. T visited the underground shelters where the civilians were hiding. The tunnels stretched deep beneath the mountains, carved long ago as protection against natural disasters. Now they held the last hope of the Velen people. He saw families huddled together, parents holding their children close. He saw younglings too young to understand what was happening, playing games in the dim light. He saw elders sitting quietly, their eyes closed, preparing themselves for the end. One small child, a girl with bright silver eyes, looked up at him as he passed. "Are you going to save us?" she asked. T knelt down to her level. He wanted to lie, to give her comfort in these final hours, but he could not make himself speak false words. "I am going to try," he said. The girl smiled at him, a pure and innocent smile that broke his heart. "That is good enough," she said. T returned to the surface as the last defense satellite exploded in the upper atmosphere. The sky was now completely dark except for the red glow of the Keth fleet. Their ships were descending, preparing for the final assault. T could see the massive form of the Keth flagship, a vessel so large it blocked out the stars behind it. Overlord Veth, the butcher of a dozen worlds, was coming personally to oversee the harvest. T stood alone on the observation deck. He had sent his officers to their positions. He had done everything he could. Now all that remained was to watch the end come. He thought about his family on the homeworld, far across the galaxy. He thought about his parents, who had been so proud when he joined the military. He thought about his younger brother, who always looked up to him. They would never know how he died. They would only know that one day, the colony of Orithroman IV stopped sending messages. A tear rolled down his cheek, leaving a trail of silver on his blue skin. "No help is coming," he whispered to himself. "No help is coming." And then something impossible happened. The sensors screamed to life. Yi's voice came through the communication device, high and panicked. "Commander, we are detecting an unidentified vessel. It just emerged from faster-than-light travel." T ran to the sensor display. His eyes went wide as he saw the readings. The ship had not come from any known direction. It had come from the dead zone, that vast region of empty space that every species avoided. Nothing lived in the dead zone. Nothing traveled through it. The radiation there was too strong, the distances too vast. But something had just come out of it. "What kind of vessel?" T demanded. Yi looked at him with confusion in her eyes. "Unknown design, Commander. The ship is broadcasting an identification signal. It says it is from a species called humans." Humans? T had heard the name before. A young species from a distant part of the galaxy. They had only achieved interstellar travel within the last century. The galactic community considered them primitive, aggressive, and dangerously emotional. Most species avoided contact with them. What were they doing here? T watched the sensor display as the human ship moved toward the Keth fleet. It was a single vessel against 87 warships. It was madness. It was suicide. But for the first time in hours, T felt something strange stir in his chest. It felt almost like hope. Captain Sue stood on the bridge of the UESS Defiance and looked at the chaos before him. The main view screen showed the Keth fleet in terrible detail. 87 warships, each one bristling with weapons, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a city. At the center of the formation sat the flagship, a massive vessel shaped like a black blade cutting through space. The Keth called it the Harvester. Sue thought that was a fitting name for a ship that had killed millions. "Captain," said Mina, his first lieutenant. She stood beside him, her dark hair tied back in a tight bun, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Are we really doing this?" Sue did not answer right away. He looked around the bridge at his crew. There were 20 officers on duty, each one at their station, each one waiting for his command. They had been on a deep exploration mission, traveling through uncharted space for 7 months. They were tired, far from home, and low on supplies. And now he was asking them to fight an entire enemy fleet. "We took a vote," Sue said finally. Everyone agreed. Mina nodded slowly. "I know. I just wanted to hear you say it out loud. Makes it feel more real." Sue understood. He felt the same way. When they had intercepted the distress signal from Orithroman IV, He had gathered the crew and explained the situation. 3 million civilians were about to be harvested by the Keth. The nearest Allied fleet was 40 days away. No one else was coming to help. He had expected hesitation. He had expected fear. Instead, every single crew member had voted to answer the call. 340 humans, choosing to fly toward almost certain death for a species they had never met. That was humanity, Sue thought, stupid and beautiful and brave. Han, he called to the weapons chief, what are we working with? Han was a large man with broad shoulders and a shaved head. He had served in 3 wars before joining the Exploration Corps. His fingers moved across his console as he checked the weapon systems. 12 plasma cannons, full charge, 40 missile tubes, about 200 missiles total. Point defense systems are operational. Shields are at maximum. He paused and looked at the view screen. Against 87 ships, we can probably kill maybe 5 or 6 before they tear us apart. That is not encouraging, Mina said. I am not here to encourage, Han replied. I am here to tell the truth. Sue smiled despite himself. Han had always been honest to the point of rudeness. It was one of the things Sue liked about him. What about the engines? Sue asked. Hana's voice came through the communication system from the engineering deck below. She was the chief engineer, a small woman with quick hands and a quicker mind. She could fix anything, build anything, and had once kept a dying ship running for 3 days with nothing but spare parts and sheer stubbornness. Engines are good, Captain. I have pushed them to 110%. We can outrun most of those Keth ships if we need to. The question is whether we want to run. We do not, Sue said. Not yet. He turned back to the view screen. The Keth fleet had noticed them now. Several smaller ships were breaking formation, moving to intercept. On the surface of the planet below, he could see the fires spreading across the land. He could imagine the terror of the people down there, watching their world die. Open a channel to the Keth flagship, Sue ordered. The communications officer, a young man named Jin, pressed several buttons on his console. Channel open, Captain. A moment later, the view screen flickered and a new image appeared. Sue felt his stomach turn at the sight. The Keth were not pleasant to look at. They had evolved from some kind of predator species, with elongated skulls, multiple eyes, and mouths full of sharp teeth. Their skin was a sickly gray-green color, covered in scales and strange growths. The one on the screen was dressed in elaborate armor decorated with the bones of fallen enemies. I am Overlord Veth, the creature said. Its voice was a wet, gurgling sound that the translator struggled to convert into human speech. You are interfering with a sanctioned harvest. Identify yourself and withdraw immediately, or you will be destroyed. Sue stood tall and met the creature's many eyes. I am Captain Sue of the United Earth ship Defiance. I am ordering you to stop your attack on the planet below and retreat from this system. There was a long moment of silence. Then Veth made a strange sound that might have been laughter. You order me, one ship against my fleet. You are either very brave or very stupid human. Probably both, Sue admitted. But that does not change my order. Leave now or we will make you leave. Veth's laughter stopped. Its many eyes narrowed as it studied Sue through the screen. Humans, it said slowly. I have heard of your species. Young, primitive, aggressive. You come from a death world where everything tries to kill you. Your ancestors fought with rocks and sticks. You have only known space travel for a single century. It leaned closer to the screen. You are insects compared to the Dominion. You will die screaming. Sue smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Maybe, but I promise you this, Overlord, we will take a lot of you with us, and your screams will be louder than ours. He gestured to Jin, who closed the channel. The image of Veth disappeared, replaced by the view of the fleet. Well, Mina said dryly, I think you made him angry. Good, Sue replied. Angry enemies make mistakes. He walked to the center of the bridge and looked at each of his officers in turn. They looked back at him with steady eyes. Fear was there, yes. He could see it in the way they held themselves, in the small tremors in their hands. But behind the fear was something stronger: determination, resolve, the stubborn human refusal to go quietly into the dark. "I am not going to lie to you," Sue said. "The odds are not in our favor. The smart thing to do would be to turn around and run. No one would blame us. No one would even know." He paused and pointed at the view screen, at the burning planet below. "But 3 million people are about to die down there. Mothers, fathers, children. They sent a cry for help into the void, not expecting anyone to answer. But we heard them. We are here, and I will be damned if we are going to let them die alone." Han cracked his knuckles. "Just tell me where to shoot, Captain." Hana's voice came through the speakers. "Engineering is ready. Let us give these monsters something to remember." Mina drew her sidearm and checked the charge. "What is the plan?" Sue looked at the enemy fleet, at the dozens of warships that stood between him and the planet. He did not have a plan. He had never faced odds like this before. But he was human, and humans did not need perfect plans. They just needed to move forward and figure things out along the way. "We fly straight at them," he said. "Fast and hard. They will expect us to keep our distance, to fight from range. Instead, we get in close where their numbers work against them. We make them afraid to shoot because they might hit each other. We become wolves in the middle of the flock." "That is insane," Mina said. Sue grinned. "I know, that is why it might work." He sat down in the captain's chair and gripped the armrests. The metal was cold against his palms. His heart was beating fast, but his mind was clear. "All hands," he said into the ship-wide communication system. "This is the captain. Battle stations. We are going in." The Defiant surged forward, its engines blazing with blue fire. Behind them, the endless void of space stretched out forever. Ahead of them, 87 enemy ships waited with weapons hot. On the bridge, Sue watched the distance counter tick down. 10,000 kilometers, 8,000, 5,000. The first Keth missiles streaked toward them, and the battle began. The universe exploded into chaos. T watched from the observation deck as the human ship dove into the heart of the Keth fleet. Missiles and plasma bolts filled the space between the vessels, creating a deadly web of fire. Any sane commander would have kept their distance, used superior speed to stay out of range. But the human captain was not sane. The Defiance flew straight into the center of the enemy formation, weaving between the larger warships with impossible agility. It was like watching a small fish swim into a school of sharks. By all logic, it should have been torn apart in seconds. But the humans were not dying. "They are using our ships as shields," Yi said in disbelief. She stood beside T, her silver eyes wide as she watched the battle unfold. "They fly so close that the Keth cannot fire without hitting their own vessels." T nodded slowly. It was a tactic born of desperation and madness. It required perfect timing, incredible reflexes, and a complete disregard for personal safety. One mistake and the human ship would crash into an enemy vessel or take a direct hit from multiple cannons. But somehow, impossibly, they kept dodging. The Defiance spun and twisted through the fleet like a dancer moving through a crowded room. Its weapons blazed constantly, striking at weak points and exposed systems. Every few seconds, another Keth ship suffered damage. A weapon platform destroyed, an engine disabled, a shield generator overloaded. On his sensor display, T watched the battle data scroll past. The human ship had already destroyed 3 Keth vessels and damaged a dozen more. It had been hit multiple times itself, but it kept fighting, kept moving, kept killing. "This is not possible," T whispered. "How are they doing this?" He did not expect an answer, but Yi gave him one anyway. "They are not following any known combat protocol. Our tactical computers cannot predict their movements because their movements make no logical sense. They are fighting purely on instinct." Instinct. The word struck T like a physical blow. The Velen and most other species in the galaxy had evolved beyond instinct. They relied on logic, calculation, and careful planning. But humans came from a different path. They had evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill them. They had survived not by outthinking their predators, but by outfighting them. T was beginning to understand what made humans so dangerous. On the Defiance, Captain Sue gripped his chair as the ship shook from another impact. The bridge was filled with smoke and the smell of burning electronics. Warning lights flashed on every console, but they were still flying, still fighting. "Damage report," he called out. Mina pulled herself up from where she had fallen and checked her console. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead, but she ignored it. "Hull breach on Deck 7. Plasma Cannon 4 is offline. Shields are down to 40%. Casualties: 17 confirmed dead, 32 wounded." Sue felt each number like a knife in his chest. 17 of his people gone. 17 families that would never see their loved ones again. But he could not afford to mourn now. Not yet. Hand status on weapons. The big man was still at his station, his fingers flying across the controls. His uniform was singed and torn, but his eyes were bright with something that looked almost like joy. "We have lost some firepower, but we still have enough to hurt them. I count 6 confirmed kills, Captain. 6 ships destroyed, maybe 15 more damaged." 6 ships, against 87. The math was still against them, but they were making a difference. Every ship they destroyed was one less threat to the planet below. "Hana," Sue called into the communication system. "How are we looking?" The chief engineer's voice came back, strained but steady. "The engines are holding, but I am not sure for how long. The cooling systems are failing. If we do not slow down soon, we are going to melt our own reactors. Can you give me another hour?" There was a pause. "I can give you 30 minutes, maybe, if you stop doing crazy things." "No promises," Sue replied. He turned back to the view screen. The Keth fleet was adjusting its formation, trying to box them in. They had learned from their earlier mistakes and were no longer firing blindly. Instead, they were coordinating their attacks, creating overlapping fields of fire that were harder to dodge. Overlord Veth was adapting. "Captain," Mina said, "they are trying to surround us. If we do not break out soon, we will be trapped." Sue studied the tactical display. She was right. The Keth ships were forming a sphere around them, closing off every escape route. In a few minutes, they would have nowhere to run. But running had never been the plan. "Han," Sue said, "target the asteroid field to our starboard side. I want a full missile volley." Han looked at him with confusion. "The asteroids, there are no enemy ships there." "Just do it." Han shrugged and entered the commands. 20 missiles streaked away from the Defiance and plunged into the asteroid field. They exploded among the rocks, shattering them into thousands of smaller pieces. "Now full speed toward the explosion," Sue ordered. The helmsman, a young woman named Yoon, hesitated for only a moment before pushing the engines to maximum. The Defiance shot forward, plunging into the cloud of debris. "Captain, the debris will tear us apart," Mina protested. "It will tear them apart too," Sue replied. "And we are smaller, we can dodge better." It was a terrible gamble. Flying through a cloud of spinning rocks was almost as dangerous as flying through enemy fire. But the Keth ships were larger and less maneuverable. They would not be able to follow. The Defiance weaved through the debris field, Yoon's hands dancing across her controls as she dodged boulder after boulder. Behind them, 2 Keth cruisers tried to follow and were immediately struck by massive rocks. Their hulls cracked open, spilling fire and bodies into space. 2 more kills, Han reported with grim satisfaction. They emerged from the debris field on the other side, battered but still alive. The Keth fleet was scattered now, their formation broken. Sue had bought them a few more minutes. But it was not enough. It would never be enough. On the Keth flagship, Overlord Veth stared at the tactical display with growing fury. 14 of his ships were destroyed. 14 ships lost to a single enemy vessel. It was unthinkable. It was humiliating. How, Veth demanded, how is this possible? His officers had no answers. They stood around him in terrified silence, afraid to draw his attention. Veth had killed subordinates for lesser failures. The humans fight without pattern, one officer finally offered. They do not follow predictable tactics. Every time we adjust our strategy, they change theirs. They should be running, another officer said. They cannot win. They must know they cannot win. Why do they keep fighting? Veth did not answer. He was watching the human ship on the display as it circled around for another attack run. It was damaged, burning, clearly on the edge of destruction. Any logical species would have retreated by now. Any logical species would have valued their own survival over the lives of strangers. But humans were not logical. Veth remembered the reports he had read about the human homeworld, a planet of constant danger where the very environment was trying to kill its inhabitants. Earthquakes, storms, predators, diseases. The creatures that had evolved there were not built for logic. They were built for survival at any cost. And survival, Veth was beginning to understand, meant something different to humans than it did to other species. Attack Pattern 7, Veth commanded. Concentrate all firepower on that ship. I want it destroyed. The Keth fleet reformed and turned their weapons toward the Defiance. Dozens of plasma cannons charged simultaneously, creating a wall of deadly energy. On the bridge of the Defiance, Sue saw the readings on his tactical display. Every surviving Keth ship was targeting them. There was no way to dodge what was coming. All hands, he said calmly into the communication system. Brace for impact. The wall of plasma fire engulfed the human ship. For a terrible moment, T thought the human ship was gone. The plasma bombardment was massive, a concentrated burst of energy from dozens of warships firing at once. No vessel could survive such an assault. The sensors showed nothing but a ball of fire where the Defiance had been. Then, impossibly, a shape emerged from the flames. The human ship was burning. Great sections of its hull were torn open, venting atmosphere and debris into space. Half its weapons were gone. Its engines flickered like dying stars, but it was still moving, still flying. Still alive. How, Yi breathed beside him, how are they still alive? T shook his head slowly. He had no answer. By every calculation, by every law of physics and tactics he knew, the humans should be dead. Their ship should be nothing but scattered wreckage. Yet there it was, wounded but defiant, turning back toward the enemy. In his 32 years of life, T had never believed in miracles. He was beginning to reconsider. On the Defiance, Captain Sue pulled himself up from the floor. The impact had thrown him from his chair, and his ribs screamed in protest as he moved. Blood dripped from a wound on his scalp, blurring his vision. But he forced himself to focus. "Report," he gasped. The bridge was in ruins. Several consoles had exploded, and 2 officers lay motionless at their stations. Sparks flew from damaged systems, and the emergency lights cast everything in a harsh red glow. But some stations were still active. Some officers were still standing. "Shields are gone," Mina reported. Her voice was strained and she clutched her left arm, which hung at an unnatural angle. "Hull integrity at 20%. We have lost decks 3 through 6 completely. Weapons are down to 4 plasma cannons and a handful of missiles." "Casualties?" Mina's voice cracked. 43 confirmed dead, over 100 wounded, many are critical. Sue closed his eyes for a moment. 43. The number echoed in his mind, each digit representing a life that had trusted him, followed him, died for him. He wanted to scream. He wanted to weep. But there was no time for grief. Not yet. "Hand." The weapons chief was still at his post, though blood covered the left side of his face from a head wound. I can still fight, Captain. Just point me at something to kill. Hana. The chief engineer's voice came through the communication system, weak and scratchy. Engineering is on fire. I have lost half my crew, but the reactor is stable and the engines will run. I will keep us moving until there is nothing left to move. Sue opened his eyes. His crew was broken, bleeding, dying, but they were still ready to fight. They were still ready to follow him into the darkness. He had never been more proud or more heartbroken. Captain, Jin called from the communication station. We are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It is the Velan commander. Sue nodded, put it through. The view screen flickered and a new image appeared. A young alien with pale blue skin and silver eyes stared back at him. Sue realized. The one who had been defending the planet. Human Captain, T said. His voice was thick with emotion. I do not understand. Why are you doing this? You came here alone. You are dying for people you have never met. Why? Sue limped toward the screen, every step sending waves of pain through his battered body. He looked at the alien commander and saw the confusion in those silver eyes. It was the same confusion he had seen on the faces of other species, other cultures. They never understood. Because no one else would, Sue said simply. But that makes no sense, T protested. You gain nothing from this sacrifice. Your species has no alliance with us. We have nothing of value to offer you. This is not logical. Sue smiled, though it hurt to do so. You are right. It is not logical. Humans are not very good at being logical. He paused, searching for the words to explain something that most humans understood instinctively. A long time ago, he said, when my species was young, we lived in a world that was always trying to kill us. Predators hunted us. Disease struck us down. The weather itself was our enemy. We should have died out. By all logic, we should have gone extinct. But you did not, T said. No, we did not, because we learned to help each other. When a member of our tribe was in danger, we did not calculate the cost of saving them. We did not ask what we would get in return. We just acted. We fought. We bled. We died for each other, not because it was logical, but because it was right. T was silent, processing the words. Over the centuries, Sue continued, my people did many terrible things. We fought wars against ourselves. We destroyed our own world with our greed and fear. We came close to extinction more than once. But that instinct, that need to help those who cannot help themselves, never went away. It is written into our very nature. It is what makes us human. Even for strangers, T asked, even for people you will never meet. Especially for them. Sue placed his hand on the screen as if reaching out across the void between them. When we first went into space, my people made a promise. We swore that we would never ignore a cry for help. We would never let the innocent suffer if we had the power to stop it, not because it was profitable, not because it was smart, but because that is who we want to be. T stared at him with those silver eyes, and Sue saw the confusion slowly transform into something else. Understanding, perhaps, or maybe something deeper. You are willing to die for a principle, T said slowly, for an idea. Yes. That is, T paused, searching for the right word. That is either the most foolish or the most noble thing I have ever heard. Sue laughed, though it sent pain shooting through his broken ribs. Probably both. Humans are complicated. An alarm blared on the bridge and Mina called out, Captain, the Keth are regrouping. They are preparing another attack. Sue turned back to the view screen. Commander T, I have to go, but I want you to know something. Whatever happens here today, you are not alone. You never were. The galaxy may have forgotten you, but humanity did not. And we never will. The connection ended, and T was left staring at a blank screen. His hands were shaking. His heart was pounding. Everything he thought he knew about the universe was being rewritten in his mind. The Velan had always believed that survival was about calculation, that resources should be preserved, risks minimized, and sacrifices avoided unless the benefit was clear. It was a philosophy that had kept their species alive for thousands of years. But the humans did not think that way. They charged into danger without counting the cost. They died for strangers without expecting reward. They fought against impossible odds simply because they believed it was right. It was madness, pure beautiful madness. And watching that burning ship turn once again toward the enemy fleet, T felt something change inside him. A new understanding was born, fragile but powerful. Perhaps survival was not just about preserving life. Perhaps it was also about preserving what made life worth living. Honor, courage, compassion, the willingness to stand up for those who could not stand up for themselves. The humans understood this. They had always understood it. And now, watching them die for his people, T understood it too. "Commander," Yi said beside him, "what should we do?" T straightened his shoulders and looked at his young officer. The fear was still there, but it was smaller now. Something stronger had taken its place. "We fight," he said. "We do everything we can to help them. We make their sacrifice mean something." Yi nodded, a new determination in her silver eyes. "Yes, Commander." As T turned to organize the ground defenses, he cast one last look at the viewscreen. The Defiance was charging once more into the enemy fleet, its remaining weapons blazing. "Thank you," he whispered to the distant ship. "Thank you for showing us what it means to be brave." The Defiance was dying. Everyone on the bridge knew it. The ship groaned around them like a wounded animal, its systems failing one by one. Emergency lights flickered. The air smelled of smoke and blood. Half the crew was dead or wounded. The remaining plasma cannons fired in irregular bursts, their power fading with each shot. But they were still fighting. Captain Su leaned against his chair, too weak to stand. His left leg was broken, and several ribs were cracked. Blood soaked through the bandage around his torso, but his eyes were still clear, still fixed on the viewscreen where the Keth fleet circled like hungry predators. "How many?" he asked. Han checked his console with trembling hands. 18 Keth ships destroyed, 23 severely damaged. We have cut their fleet nearly in half, Captain. 18 ships, against 1. Su felt a grim satisfaction at the number. Whatever happened next, they had made history today. "Captain," Mina said from her station. Her broken arm was now in a crude sling, but she refused to leave the bridge. "I have an idea." Su turned to look at her. Even now, covered in blood and dirt and exhaustion, she stood straight. The fire in her eyes had not dimmed. "Tell me." "We overload the faster-than-light drive. Use it as a bomb. We fly into the middle of their fleet and detonate. It would take out the flagship and at least 10 more ships." The bridge went silent. Everyone understood what she was suggesting. It would be a suicide run. There would be no coming back. For a long moment, Su considered it. It would work. The energy released by an overloaded FTL drive was massive. It would guarantee that the Keth fleet could not continue the attack on Orithroman 4. It would save millions of lives. But it would kill his crew, all of them. "No," he said finally. Mina started to protest, but Su raised his hand. "I did not come here to die. I came here to win. There has to be another way." Han spoke up from his station. "Captain, what if we do not need to destroy them? What if we just need to make them leave?" "Go on." The big weapons chief pointed at his display. "We have been broadcasting this battle on the emergency communication frequency. Standard protocol for any vessel in distress. Every ship within range can see what is happening here. So right now, 17 star systems are watching this fight in real time. They are seeing what the Keth truly are. They are seeing what they do to helpless worlds." Han paused, a strange smile crossing his battered face. "And they are seeing what one human ship did against an entire fleet." Su understood immediately. "You want to shame them into retreating." "Not just shame them. Destroy their reputation. The Keth rule through fear. They conquer because other species are too afraid to resist. But what happens when the galaxy sees that they can be resisted? That a single ship from a young species can fight them to a standstill? Mina nodded slowly, catching on. Other species will see this and realize the Keth can be beaten. They will start to fight back. The Dominion's whole power structure could collapse. Overlord Veth knows this, Han said. He knows that if this battle continues, he might win here, but he will lose everywhere else. The cost of destroying us has already exceeded the value of this planet. He just needs an excuse to retreat without looking weak. Sue considered the strategy. It was risky. It depended on the Keth commander being rational, being willing to cut his losses, but it was better than dying. Jin, Sue said to the communications officer, open a channel to the Keth flagship. Broadcast it across all frequencies. I want everyone to hear this. Jin nodded and pressed the controls. Channel open, Captain. Broadcasting on all frequencies. The view screen flickered and Overlord Veth appeared once again. The creature looked different now. Its many eyes were narrowed and its scales had darkened with what might have been anger or fear. Behind it, Sue could see chaos on the Keth bridge, warning lights, panicked officers, the signs of a battle going badly. Human, Veth growled. You are still alive, I am impressed. I am stubborn, Sue replied. It is a human trait. You cannot win. Even now you are dying. Your ship will not survive another hour. Probably not. Sue forced himself to stand, ignoring the agony in his broken leg. He wanted to face the Keth commander on his feet. But before I die, I want you to know something. I want everyone watching to know something. He gestured at the view screen, at the burning wreck of his ship, at his wounded crew still standing at their posts. This is humanity. We are a young species. We are not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. We have only been in space for a single century, but we do not abandon those who need help. We do not surrender to tyrants, and we do not go quietly into the dark. Veth hissed in fury. You are insects. Your defiance means nothing. Then why are 18 of your ships dead? Sue shot back. Why is your fleet in chaos? Why are you afraid? The word hung in the air between them. Afraid. It was an insult no Keth commander could ignore. I am not afraid of you, human. Then finish it. Come and destroy us, but know this. Sue pointed directly at the screen. Every species in 17 star systems is watching right now. They see how hard we are fighting. They see that the mighty Keth Dominion cannot crush a single human vessel, and they are asking themselves a question. If one ship can do this, what could a fleet do? What could an alliance do? Sue smiled, showing his teeth in a very human expression of threat. You can kill us, Overlord, but you cannot kill what we represent. The galaxy is watching. They will remember this day, and they will stop being afraid. The bridge was silent. On the view screen, Veth stared at Sue with undisguised hatred. The creature's claws flexed, and for a moment Sue thought it would order the final attack. Then Veth's eyes flickered to something off-screen. Perhaps a tactical display. Perhaps a communication from the Dominion's home world. Perhaps simply the weight of reality pressing down on its scaled shoulders. This world is not worth more of my fleet, Veth said finally. Its voice was cold, controlled, trying to save face before the watching galaxy. We will return, and when we do, we will remember the humans. The channel closed, and on the sensor display, T watched in disbelief as the Keth fleet began to withdraw. One by one, the enemy ships turned away from Orithroman 4 and accelerated into the void. In minutes, they were gone, vanishing into faster-than-light travel as quickly as they had come. The battle was over. T stood on the observation deck, tears streaming down his blue cheeks. Around him, the staff of the command center was erupting in celebration. Yi threw her arms around him, laughing and crying at the same time. Governor Yuna sank to her knees, her hands raised to the sky in thanks. On the view screen, the Defiance drifted alone in orbit. It was barely recognizable as a ship anymore. Its hull was torn open in a dozen places. Its lights flickered weakly. Smoke and debris trailed behind it like blood from a wound. But it was alive, and so was everyone on Orithroman 4. T opened a communication channel to the human ship. It took several seconds for the connection to establish, and when Captain Sue's face appeared on the screen, T felt his heart clench at the sight. The human was covered in blood, barely standing, clearly moments away from collapse. "Captain Sue," T said, his voice thick with emotion. "I do not have the words to thank you. You saved my people. You saved 3 million lives. We owe you everything." Sue smiled weakly. "You do not owe us anything, Commander. We were just doing what humans do." "But your ship, your crew, how many did you lose?" The smile faded from Sue's face, replaced by a grief so deep it seemed to age him years in a single moment. 63 of my people are dead. Another 100 are wounded. My ship will never fly again." He paused and took a shaky breath. "But we saved your world. That is enough. That will always be enough." T bowed his head in respect. "Their sacrifice will never be forgotten. I swear it. The Velen people will remember this day for 1,000 generations." "Just remember the lesson," Sue said softly. "Remember that you are never alone, that there is always hope, even when all seems lost. That is what my people died for. That is the only memorial we need." The connection wavered as the Defiance's power systems finally began to fail. But before the screen went dark, Sue spoke one last time. "Tell your people they are not alone anymore. None of you are. Humanity is here, and we will always answer the call." The screen went black, and in the sudden silence, T felt the weight of those words settle into his soul. In the days that followed, rescue ships arrived from allied systems. They brought medical supplies, repair teams, and the beginning of what would become a new alliance between Earth and the Velen homeworld. The crew of the Defiance was evacuated to a medical station, where they would spend months recovering from their wounds. The recording of the battle spread across the galaxy. Species that had cowered before the Keth watched in amazement as a single human ship fought the entire Dominion fleet. And for the first time in centuries, they began to believe that resistance was possible. The Keth would never recover. Within a decade, their empire crumbled as conquered worlds rose up against them. The age of fear was ending. And it had all started with a single ship, a single crew, a single captain who refused to ignore a cry for help. On the observation deck where he had once prepared to die, T looked up at the stars and smiled. No help had been coming, and then a human warship appeared from the endless void. It was the beginning of a new age for the galaxy, an age of hope, an age of courage, an age of humanity.